I mean, what a sick intro. Welcome to the Suffering
Pretty
Sports
badass.
Fan. Welcome to the Suffering Sports Fan podcast. I'm Adam Avin. That's my father, Roy Avin. And,
Hello.
you know, Dad, we are very big Dolphins fans. I've watched every game for as long as I can remember, you before that. But what's your reason for wanting to do this podcast? Obviously, you do a bunch of stuff, but uh,
Yeah.
why this one?
Uh, getting a chance to do something with you is obviously awesome and great for me to get to do. But also, you and I watch these games every weekend. You're now
Yep.
up at college when we watch them. We talk about them after the games. And actually, last year and the last couple of years have been mostly enjoyable, give or take the end of the season disasters. But for many years, talking decades here, it's been a rough go as a Dolphin fan. I keep trying to,
Right.
I remember like since you've been alive watching, you've never seen us win a playoff game. That's crazy.
Right.
Coming from an era when I was watching them where we didn't win a Super Bowl while I was watching them, but we got to a few and we were great. We were one of the best teams in the league. And every
Right.
year you knew going in, one, you were exciting. You were putting up 30, 40 points all the time.
Right.
And maybe you lost, but you knew the next year, okay, we're going to be good again. And this went on for a long time. And then, of course, Marino retired, and it's been a rough go ever since. I was actually at the last playoff win. That's that was a memory, the Lamar Smith touchdown against the Colts. That I was at that game, and
Right. Right. 23 years since the last playoff win. That's longer than I've been alive. You have not seen a Super Bowl win in your lifetime, and as long as I've been alive, not a playoff
yeah,
win with that either. So, suffering is a good word when we're talking about being a Dolphins fan
yeah,
for the past 3 decades, right? But over the past couple of years, there has been that change, and so we're hoping that by the time the Dolphins maybe win a playoff game, maybe win a Super Bowl, that won't be the name of this podcast anymore. Who knows if we're even going to still be doing it?
maybe
But
we
if we
end
win
maybe
it,
we
if
end the podcast altogether. But I
on a
wanted an
Super Bowl, right?
opportunity. I want an opportunity to just come on real quick after a game and just talk for 10 minutes about the good and the bad, and just have a chance to talk. And I do a lot of podcasting, and you're doing broadcasting, and so it just seemed like something we could do, and have a lot of fun. And I think along the way, maybe we can even talk about other sports. This will be mostly a Dolphin podcast, I think, as you and I have discussed. But we're
Right.
also Heat fans, and we have friends that follow other teams like the Cowboys and the Vikings
Right.
and the Jets,
And
this on, and let
right.
them come
And
on and
suffer.
vent a little bit.
Look, the suffering sports fan is for everybody as well.
That's right.
It's not just Dolphins fans that have been suffering. And I know that we can sit here and other people would say, well, why would you name your podcast that? The Dolphins are good right now. My team's been bad for 20 years also. We haven't won either. Well, it just so happens that up until a few years ago, we really did suffer for a very long time as Dolphins fans, you more than me, and my grandpa, your dad, more than that. And so this Dolphins lineage of suffering sports fandom has been going on for quite some time, and hopefully we are on the horizon of something different.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I
It's
went through decades where I didn't stop. I stopped what I was doing on a particular day to watch the game.
right,
And then I'll be honest, before kind of like the Tua era, there may have been games where it's like I didn't think we had a chance to win, and I had a chance to go do anything else, and I would go do the anything else, which is
right,
unthinkable. So you're sort of back at a stage where now all I want is for us to be exciting and to be
right,
a team worth watching. I think that's underappreciated. If everybody wants a Super Bowl and wants this and that, but we went through more than 10 years of winning or losing games 7-3. And that is torture,
right.
especially for people that go to the stadium in 110 degrees. So now, hey, win or lose, but it's 42-35. I can enjoy myself watching that. And
And
we're winning games doing that. So,
right, and obviously we want to win games. So on that note, let's talk about this current
yeah,
Dolphins team and what's been going on over the past couple seasons. They've had success since the arrival of head coach Mike McDaniel, who has really took this team all on his own and really lifted them up 2 consecutive years in the playoffs. Haven't gotten that victory yet. But it seems like this team is in a different place than it was just a few seasons ago, before Mike McDaniel came and before Tua and the rest of the Dolphins offense have really established themselves as a powerhouse right now in the league. There was a lot of changeover this offseason. So I was thinking, since this is the first episode before we get into what's to come this season, that we kind
Right.
of recap everything that happened this offseason, and specifically what happened after their playoff loss to the Chiefs. Obviously, that was very devastating. A lot of injuries took place at the end of last year. The offensive line was decimated. Waddle, Tyreek, both hurt. Tua was dealing with his own stuff, and then the secondary was completely demolished as well. Not to mention both Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, two of the star defensive linemen, the edge rushers for the Dolphins defense, go down with injuries and were out for the back half of the season as well. So when you think about all of those things that took place at the end of the year, they didn't stand a chance in a negative 30-degree game in Kansas
No, no.
against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, right?
I went into that game knowing there's no chance we're winning the game, and you don't want to think like that. But with the injuries we had and under the conditions of that game against the particular team you were playing, I mean, there was no
Who end up
chance.
being the Super Bowl champs,
I,
right?
I
I
was
mean,
honestly glad we scored at all in that game so that it wasn't a shutout, and so it was what it was. But I don't think that meant what the team was about last year. I don't. I think it was a really, really
right.
good team that
I
if
think
not
the I think
for if not for a last couple of minutes disaster of Tennessee, we win the
right.
division. We're hosting a playoff game. All things are different. So who knows?
That Tennessee game was a big turning point in the season, like you mentioned, and that team you saw at the end of the year was not the same team that started off the year, a team that which put up 70 points in a game, something that hasn't been done in quite some time. And so now we look specifically at the pieces that the Dolphins lost and some of the acquisitions that they got this season. So let's talk about some of those big pieces first, and I want to hear your thoughts on who you think might have been the biggest piece to go, one that the Dolphins probably wish they still had going into the 2024 season. So obviously the biggest one that Dolphin fans were pretty upset about, including myself. I think this guy is a future Pro Bowler. He's made a name for himself, especially in the past couple of years. That's Christian Wilkins, signs a big deal to the Raiders. And you knew once you saw that number, that contract that he
Yeah.
got, 4 years, I believe it was around $120 million for a defensive lineman. It's okay to let him walk if you have with that kind of money that you need to spend on a guy like some of the players we're going to be talking about later in this episode. So that was a pretty big one right there. Not to mention, you lose Robert Hunt, offensive lineman, to the Panthers, another $100 million contract. Brandon Jones, starting safety, and Jerome Baker, our captain middle linebacker,
Yeah.
also leaves the team as well. So that's a few players. You cut Xavier Howard, who's been a staple of the Dolphins defense for the past almost a decade, a superstar down here in Miami. Connor Williams gets hurt, offensive line. He looks like he's not returning as well. So that's 6 people right there. Players that either went to other teams or are still trying to figure out what they're going to do. Unfortunately, just not here in Miami. So when you hear those guys, Dad, is there somebody as a lifelong Dolphins fan that you think, well, I remember watching a guy like this, and he's a difference maker. And I'm afraid that with him not back on the team, that could be a poor position group or something.
So I think X was just his time for him to
Xavier
go. I
Howard,
think
right?
I think he had a great career with us. You could see the decline in speed and effectiveness. Still a very solid player, but not the player he was. So you're going to go through that. And I think the replacements that we got for the secondary are going to be really good, if not better. So I
Right.
think we're going to be okay there. Look, Christian Wilkins is great, and he was awesome last year at his best year. He was certainly effective, but I think historically you don't give that much money to a defensive tackle unless they're Hall of Fame level. You know, we made a
Right.
mistake 10 years ago of giving that kind of money to Ndamukong Suh, who at the time was like that guy, and he was pretty good, but we didn't win any games. It didn't make a difference.
Right.
And I think you need to put your money in the places where we put our money. I would have loved to have kept him since we drafted him and developed him, and he's going to be good. You know he's going to be a good player.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't dedicate that amount of your salary to that position. It's got to be QB, offensive, left tackle, defensive end. safety. Those are the positions
Right.
that you put all your money in, not in middle deep defensive tackle, I think. So
Yeah,
that's
and
unfortunate.
especially when you look at how the Dolphins have developed defensive linemen over the past few years. You talk about Zach Sealer, some other guys who they've brought in with the Dolphins defense over the years. I know there's been a lot of change in coaches, but you bring up a good point is that since Ndamukong Suh, they haven't put in a lot of effort into the defensive line, and year after year, they've actually shown out, whether that's through the draft or other undrafted guys that they've brought in, and they've spent their money in other positions, which is pretty
Yeah, I
important.
mean, I think more importantly are Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb on the ends. That's though we need them. They need to come back.
Yeah,
They need to play. And Chop Robinson, who we drafted, we need to get to the quarterback. We need those guys to play. So that's more important. I think the loss of Jerome Baker, that's disappointing. He had a really good season. Sometimes he was out of position. You could see, but I think he's a really good player. But happy for him, got another contract. So yeah, maybe that one's just sort of disappointing. You would have thought we'd keep
yeah.
him. Oh, you know which one you forgot that was great was Andrew Van
Who'd I
Ginkel.
forget?
Van
Oh,
Ginkel.
Andrew Van Ginkel heads to
Now that was a
Minnesota,
bummer. That may have been the most
reunites
disappointing loss. Yeah,
reunites with Brian Flores. Yeah, slipped my mind. That was definitely a big loss because I mean this past year he emerged as a not only a fan favorite but I mean a team favorite. I mean not only
yeah.
highlighted in Hard Knocks and all those things, but I mean Andrew Van Ginkel was seriously a superstar. Good job calling me out. You're definitely right about that. Uh, about that one. So you mentioned some of the players that could be that the Dolphins could be affected by not having their presence, whether that's in the locker room because of their leadership and also on the field. But let's talk about some of the guys that they either drafted or that they just brought in through free agency. So let's start with the secondary. You mentioned Xavier Howard's loss. It's obviously huge, kind of just as a figure in Miami. But they signed Jordan Poyer to pair him next to Javon Holland. He comes over from Buffalo, a rival, which we've played against him.
Yep.
He's played against Tua for many years and against the Dolphins for many years, but he's finally down here. And then we also signed Kendall Fuller, a cornerback, played in Washington. Now we pair him with Jalen Ramsey. He's younger than Xavier Howard, still has a lot of tread on the tires left. Always at the top of the league in interceptions year after year. So you have two ball hawks, two people that can match up one-on-one with some other pretty good receivers, and specifically in the division when you're looking at the Jets with Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams. You need top dogs that can defend all those guys. So the
Yeah.
secondary definitely looks stronger. But then you look at the rest of the defense. Chop Robinson, Mo Kamara, two edge rushers that the Dolphins drafted. You hopefully get Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb back, but then you go out and you re-sign Emmanuel Ogbah with the team for a few years. Kind of took a backseat last year because of how good Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb played. But then Shaq Barrett signs with the Dolphins. He retires. You don't really know. You're down an edge rusher on defense, so you're bringing Emmanuel Ogbah, and then in the middle linebacker position to replace Jerome Baker. I know these are a lot of people I'm going through here kind of fast, but you bring in Jordan Brooks from Seattle, who
Yeah,
middle
that's a good one.
linebacker over there. He was top 5 in tackles over the past couple seasons, so he is always all around the field. He's always in the right place. Anthony Walker is another guy from Cleveland. So this is kind of a revamped defense. Obviously, Anthony Weaver comes over from Baltimore. He was the associate head coach there, a defensive guy. And so far, players have been raving about him and this new defense. And if this defense, which for the majority of last season was very good until the injuries that took place, I mean, if they can step it up like we hope the offense will, and we'll get to the offense in a little bit. I mean, this could be very big for the Dolphins defense with some of
I
these new
think
pieces
you know
and
what
maybe have even improved.
I don't think the defense last year was as good as it should have been. There were a lot of moments that didn't make any sense as you were watching the games, and I don't know what maybe Vic Fangio thought he was doing or not, but I don't. I think a lot of Dolphin fans were disappointed. Honestly, I
For
think
sure.
uh, I think a lot of players weren't that disappointed to see him go, and I think that the guy we got, Anthony Weaver, and some of the additions, I think we're going to be okay. I don't know if we're going to be top 5 defense or if we're going to be amazing, but I
Right.
certainly don't think we're going to be bad.
No, definitely not. The defense, if they can play the right way in certain times in games, I think that's the most important thing. Vic Fangio last year, it's not obviously he's been in the league for a long time. People respect him, but there were some situations where you're going all out blitz on third down. You're giving up a lot of yards, specifically late in games, some questionable decisions, not pairing Jalen Ramsey up against the top receiver on another team, maybe leaving Kader Kohu out there on an island. I know that was a big talking point
That was a bit,
later in
well,
this
that
later in the
cost us the
season.
Bills game, and that cost us the Tennessee game by not having Jalen Ramsey on the other team's best guy, and that was a mistake.
And look, anything can happen. Jalen Ramsey
But
could mess up. Somebody could get injured. You never know. But it should make sense that you think before the game, hey, let's put our best player, matched up with the other team so that
right.
we have a chance in this game at the end. But let's go to the offensive side of the ball because the Dolphins definitely have some weapons over here. They sign Odell Beckham Jr. They sign Jonnu Smith, tight end, comes over from Atlanta, and Jalen Waddle gets that contract extension. And so these are a lot of players here now on offense. The offensive line, not to mention, they brought in a couple guys and actually drafted players as well to kind of build up that offensive line. They're building around Tua right now, and I want to move over to him. I know we could talk about this offense forever, but let's get to Tua real quick because not first of all, you see it at the bottom of your screen. He just signed the contract extension yesterday. We were planning on doing this podcast regardless. It just so happens that the day before Tua signs his contract extension, 4 years, $212 million is the largest contract in Dolphins history. What do you think about that contract and how the offense is now shaped around him? Because this contract not only does it prove, they have faith in Tua, but they're in win now mode, and this is their guy.
So I think that people get too caught up in the number. The numbers are insane for any player. Maybe no player should make $50 million a year playing any sport, but that is what it is, and they do. So that said, he's the best quarterback we've had in 25 years. It's inarguable. You cannot debate that. He's led the league in passing. He's won a lot of games. He's gone to the playoffs back-to-back years. Everything you've wanted him to do, get stronger, get more accurate, stay healthy, he's done. He's worked hard to do. He seems like a good guy. You cannot just say, well, I don't know if we can win a Super Bowl, so let's chuck this guy out the window. You could do that with 25 quarterbacks a year, where you could say, well, they're not Mahomes, they're not Josh Allen, they're not Joe Burrow. Let's get a new guy. You can't constantly keep doing that. And if what it takes to keep him is that, then that's what it takes. I'm happy that he's here. It'll be what it'll be.
100%. I think you mentioned the goalpost it's been getting moved for Tua ever since he's come into the league. The first thing was he doesn't have the arm. He can't throw deep. Well, he showed you he can throw deep. Then the next thing was, but he can't stay healthy for a full season. We saw that he can throw the ball a little bit farther than we thought, but can he play a full 17 games? Not only does he do that, the following year, he led the league in passing yards. For a guy that no one says can throw deep, who leads the league in every deep ball completion statistic there is, and passer rating, top 5, passing yards, leads the league, touchdowns, not crazy amount of interceptions, anything like that. This offense is aggressive because of Tua and how good he is at placing the ball for his receivers. It's all built around speed. And yes, I know there's people that think, Tua gets made by Tyreek. He's made by Waddle, but he came in with these weapons and things like that. Now he's succeeding. But think about the situation he was in originally when he got drafted and the players he was throwing to. And they still had a winning record then with him at quarterback. And when he was not quarterback and hurt, they went 0-5 in that stretch. Remember Jacoby Brissett a few years ago, 2020,
Correct.
2021. Right now he's the guy. He has the weapons. And he's making their lives easier as well because of his pinpoint ball placement. Right, especially when we're talking about getting down the field.
It's proven that he needs to have an offense that's of a certain design with certain players to work for his strengths. But they say that as if it's a bad thing. You figure out what your quarterback's strengths, you build around it, and you make a system. That's how it should work. Is he a guy that can just roam free and make just stuff randomly happen? Maybe not. That's not his thing. And that may have been the fault that didn't work when he was with Brian Flores, who wanted a guy that can just go out there and win a game without any old system. And maybe Tua wasn't that guy for that, but he's been awesome, man. He's great. And we can rehash a lot of stuff. I don't know if we want to do that, but there's reasons we lost some games last year that I don't think were his fault. Maybe sometimes
Right.
they were, but you know,
I think the big turning point in the season, and I know they lost a couple games throughout, but when we got to that Tennessee game, Week 14, Thursday night football, that everyone thought that was an easy win. In that game, Connor Williams got hurt, Teron Armstead got hurt, Tyreek and Waddle were banged up. We didn't have Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Our secondary was hurt. That game was a disaster, and they were still up 14 points with only a few minutes left to play. They end up losing that
and you
game.
let a rookie quarterback who hadn't won many games go up and down the field on you two drives in a row. You couldn't stop him. Maybe that's not Tua's fault.
Right.
I mean, I'm just saying.
So right, there's a lot of things we can go into. Blame gets cast onto for
Right. I don't know if we want to
everything,
rehash all that. It's old news.
but
But yeah,
100%. But all I'm saying is when we're talking about the future of this team, Mike McDaniel specifically has uplifted Tua. They've made him believe that he's the guy. They believe in him, that he can lead this team to the playoffs, to finally get that victory, and hopefully beyond that for the ultimate win. And I think we're going to see this year with Tua's third year in this McDaniel Shanahan style system. Quick throws, a lot of speed, hopefully with an improved offensive line. And if the defense is as good as it is, this Dolphins team should be putting up big points on a lot of teams. And we're going to get into the schedule.
I think the beginning of the season, we're going to be putting up a lot of points in the beginning of the season while we're healthy, while people haven't figured out some stuff. I know McDaniel will have some new wrinkles. They're going to use some of the new guys they brought in. I think it's be really exciting. The problem may be as the schedule gets harder, which we'll get into, but I expect it to be a lot of fun.
Look, all we can say. I mean, I've been a Tua believer since he got into the league. I thought a lot of the accusations and things that were thrown at him and him being the reason for all the Dolphins' failures and troubles as seasons go along are completely unjust. And yes, he doesn't always have the best game. Sometimes the pressure gets to him. Maybe in the cold weather, I understand all of that, but it's still not to say that for 13 out of the 17 weeks of the NFL season the past 2 years. I mean, he's leading the league in passing yards. He's doing it all for this team. Yes, Tyreek Hill's the focal point because he's an athlete. He's an athlete as fast as we've never seen. But there's still a guy that has to get him the ball, and Tua's done a phenomenal job at that with the help of Mike McDaniel. And
He's just getting better.
I'm excited to see what he's going to do this season and for the next 3 years after that. But I really think this year with this Dolphins team, it is an opportunity for them to go on a run with him as their guy. That being said, let's get straight into our schedule predictions because we're excited about this Dolphins team. I don't know if we're going to disagree here, but here we go. This is the Miami Dolphins 2024 schedule. 18 weeks of football, bye week in week 6. You see some of their division rivals on there. But that you mentioned, that start of the season looks interesting. I'm going to go first here. And week 1, I actually struggled with a little bit. But ultimately, it came to the fact that I think the Dolphins are better at every position than the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so here I'm going with a victory. I think the Dolphins start off the season 1-0.
And it's at home, and I think we're not losing the first home game to Jacksonville.
This is going to be a common theme, I think, throughout these first weeks here as we talk about the schedule. Now week 2.
Can we point out before we get into that? See, the schedule makers removed Miami's main advantage, which is always the September games at home. So if you look at game 1, we're playing another Florida team that is not going to be hindered by the heat as much, which is not really doesn't play to our advantage. So they took that away. And then you go into week 2. Week 2's at night. It's at home, but it's at night. So the first 2 games that are in September, where usually Buffalo comes down here and they're dying, which gives us an advantage, they've removed. It's still going to be pretty hot even at night, but certainly not in the sun. But go ahead into game 2.
Yeah, game 2, obviously the Buffalo Bills. We know Josh Allen and how he's destroyed the Dolphins since he's come into the league. I mean, when he plays against Miami, he's just a different beast than any other team he plays against. That being said, this Bills team isn't the same. And I think the fact that it's at home in Miami Thursday Night Football. This is also another one where I think the Dolphins get this victory. Might be a little bit surprising, but I think people forget a little bit. Yes, things have happened with the Dolphins on national TV. They might not always come away with the victory, but Tua actually does play pretty well on nationally televised games. And I think the fact that it's at Miami, it's week 2, before we really get into the season, this is going to be a victory for the Dolphins. Now let's go a little fast here because I don't want to get too repetitive. Week 3, they travel to Seattle. I think this is a victory. Seattle's a difficult environment. That's a good team, but they've kind of been at a stalemate over the past few years. They made the playoffs 2 years ago. They missed it this past season. Geno Smith has had a resurgence as a quarterback, and they have the wide receivers. But they did lose pieces on defense, the Seahawks. We obviously have their middle linebacker from last year now. This isn't the same Seahawks team as years past, and not to mention the fact that Pete Carroll is no longer the head coach in Seattle. So I really don't know what that Seattle team is going to be like, but what I do know is that I do believe the Dolphins are going to be the better team that week. Week 4, Tennessee, Monday Night Football. This is their revenge game. This is the team that ruined their season last year. We didn't expect it to happen, and I think the Dolphins come back and do it in a big way. Tua's going to want to play well. The whole team will, and I don't think Mike McDaniel is going to let that opportunity slip by this Dolphins team. 4-0, right? I mean, this is great.
It doesn't. Yeah, it seems yeah, it seems amazing, but yeah, sure.
Right. 4-0. We started last year 3-0, so it's not that crazy, right? But here we go. Tennessee, week 4, that's a victory. Here we go into week 5, division rival New England Patriots. Drake May's their new quarterback, rookie out of UNC. Gerard Mayo's the head coach now. Bill Belichick not in the building anymore. We know what the Patriots defense is. It's still elite. They re-signed Jabril Peppers just the other day, one of their key defensive stars. So that defense is tough, but that offense, we don't know where it's going to sit or if Drake May will be any good right at the start, because a defense like the Dolphins and an offense as lethal as that could put a rookie quarterback with very few with not a lot of college games under his belt under pressure. So I think that's a victory for the Dolphins right there, and they start 5-0.
I don't disagree with a lot of those. The Patriots are going to be one of the worst teams in football. They have no skill position players. Miami's going to smoke them. So, yeah, I mean, of those, Buffalo's obviously a tough one. It's on a short week, so I think that helps us a bit. Plus, it's early in the season. And I think Buffalo has lost a lot of key talent, and they'll get better with some of their receivers and things, but this is early in the season. That might be an advantage for Miami. The rest of the teams I think we should beat.
All right, here we go. We skip week 6 into week 7. They play the Indianapolis Colts again. I'm going another victory.
We're not losing any games.
I'm not going to get sick of seeing W's on the screen, Dad. But Anthony Richardson obviously injured last year, but he's going to be their quarterback for the future. I think he's really good, and that Colts team could be a problem. I actually think they're going to be much improved from last season with Anthony Richardson and just kind of a second year with that system. As it stands. And so I think the Colts have actually improved all around, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to beat the Dolphins there. I think they can travel to Indy and get that win. Then you look at Arizona. Another one, even with Kyler Murray, I don't see this team making the playoffs. They're in a tough division with the Rams, with the Seahawks, with the 49ers. It wouldn't shock me if they're the worst team in that division once again. I think the Dolphins get the win there. We've seen Tua have success against the Cardinals. Actually, one of his first big breakout games was against Arizona, and this one is at home. So I think they get this one. Now this is where things change for me a little bit. All right? Maybe not too much, but I think here you travel to Buffalo. It's in November. It's not super cold yet, but that is a place where Josh Allen thrives. We have seen Tua and the Dolphins go up to Buffalo and compete in colder weather a couple seasons ago. They didn't get the win. They only lost by a few points. I don't know if this game is going to be the same, but I do think the Dolphins end up losing here. Now, if you were to tell me that the Dolphins start their season off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-0, I would be pretty happy for their first loss coming in week 9 against a division rival and Josh Allen. So I'm pretty happy with that. I also think, unfortunately, week 10 is a loss as well to the LA Rams. I'm a big Matthew Stafford fan. I think with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua coming back in a year 2 with M3, with Sean McVay, I think they figured it out. The only thing with the Rams is going to be their defense. We don't know how it's going to be. Obviously, Aaron Donald retires, and last year their defense was pretty poor, and it was up to Matthew Stafford and the Rams to go on last-minute drives to save games. That could be a real similar game to the Dolphins-Cowboys game last year. A lot of field goals going directly back and forth up until the very end. But, the Dolphins are going to lose some games this year. I wish they went 17-0 like back in 72, but that's not going to happen. I think these are two losses right here.
They seem like obvious scheduled losses. I mean, it's going to be hard for us to go from never beating Buffalo really to sweeping them in one season. So I think splitting is fine if you can at least get that. And the Rams on the road, that's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, 100%. You look at the upcoming schedule here, and I think this is where it gets hard. Now we're into the hard part of the season. This is a transition period right here.
Well, you got two home games coming up.
Right, you have a week 11 and week 12, two home games against the Raiders and the Patriots. Both of those for me are going to be victories. The Dolphins are going to sweep the Patriots this season, and Antonio Pierce and the Raiders, we don't know where they stand. Hell, we don't even know if Devontae Adams is going to be a Raider by week 11 anyways. He might be with Aaron Rodgers, and the Dolphins might play Devontae Adams in week 14 and 18. Exactly. But now you're into the real stretch of things. And what have we seen from the Dolphins in recent years? They collapse at the end of the season, and hopefully that's not going to be the case this year. But this is where my mind is at when we talk about this particularly end of the season schedule for Miami. Thanksgiving Day, the Green Bay Packers, primetime game. I think this game is going to be a victory. 2 years ago, when Aaron Rodgers was still in Green Bay, they traveled to Miami to play the Dolphins. Tua was healthy for that game to start. They were up by 2 touchdowns, and then Tua got a concussion that was undiagnosed at the time. We didn't find out till the next day, but he looked pretty bad, and he threw a few picks in the second half. There were a couple other turnovers by other key Dolphins players, and they just completely blew that game. I think that game has been in the back of their heads. That was obviously one that derailed their season, and their quarterback was out for the rest of the season as well. They want that win just like they want that Titans win in week 4. Here is where we move along. The Jets in that game, that's going to be a win. Aaron Rodgers hasn't faced that Dolphins defense yet. I think he's going to have it pretty easy going up against the Patriots and the Bills beforehand. He meets the Dolphins for the first time, his hardest test in the division so far. I think the Dolphins get that victory here. Now we're looking pretty good. This Texans game, here when I think about this Texans game, I love it. And I do truly believe this. When I'm thinking about these games here at the end of the season, I'm thinking about the coaches. I'm thinking about Mike McDaniel on offense and DeMeco Ryans on defense. And the way that Texans defense looked last year with a bunch of rookies, CJ Stroud obviously was amazing, but specifically when we're talking about the defense, they thrived. I just think McDaniel coming and working with him at the same time back in the day in San Francisco, I just think he's going to be the master. He's going to know how to deal with that Texans defense and the plays that he's drawn up. If they can run on 3rd and 1 and get those first downs and just play smart football, I think the Dolphins can get the victory there. But, the master, Kyle Shanahan, that's where McDaniel learned everything from. And I'm not so sure that Mike McDaniel will be able to overcome those 49ers. Then you look here, week 17, Browns, Sunday Night Football. Running through these a little fast because I think that's another victory. I don't have the full faith in the Browns. Deshaun Watson didn't look good last year, plain and simple. We don't know if he's going to come back and play the same way, but it took Joe Flacco to save the day last year for them to go on a playoff run, essentially, at the end of the year. They were in every game because of a 39-year-old quarterback. And when Deshaun Watson was in the game prior to Joe Flacco taking over, they did not look very good. Again, we know what that defense can do, but by the end of the year, there's no telling what can happen. And if the offense is as bad as it was last year prior to Joe Flacco taking over, I think the Dolphins get that one easy. Again, we know what Tua could do in primetime football. And I think they're going to be okay that week. Fortunately, the last game of the season, I do think the Jets are good enough to where the Dolphins and them can split the series this season. So this is my schedule right here. I don't know if that week 18 game against the Jets is going to be because the Dolphins sit everybody because they've already clinched the playoffs because at that point they were 13-3.
Well, by that record, they may not need that game. Yeah.
But they're 13-4, I think, at the end of the season. And I think when you look at the Dolphins over the past couple seasons, they've improved every year. at least by a little bit. They were 9-8 McDaniel's first season, and then last year they made the playoffs once again, barely losing the division last game of the year to the Buffalo Bills. And so this year, I think they take that extra leap. I do think they've improved as a roster, and I think they go 13-4 here. So it's your turn. I know that was a lot of me talking and going through the schedule,
Okay.
but you're the expert here. You've watched this team for so long. What do you think? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, so I'm gonna agree. I'm just gonna jump right in. I set this up just to agree with you right off the bat with the first 5 games, because a couple of things. I mean, I'm gonna say that on the short week at home, we get that Buffalo win. That's the tough game out of that early stretch. Miami historically starts the seasons off well and collapses at the end. I think after those first couple of games, Seattle, Tennessee at home, and the Patriots, I think, are all winnable. I think we're going to be good. We're going to be hopefully not as injured early in the season. And I think 5-0 or maybe 4-1 is totally within reach.
Definitely.
The Colts, the Colts, that could be a tough one on the road. They might surprise a lot of people. Anthony Richardson might give people a lot of trouble. Wouldn't surprise me if we lost that game. But it is indoors. I think that's a game that I'm going to give us a win, but that might be a slip up. It is coming off a bye, so I'm going to give us that win. Arizona, I think like you, I don't think they're very good, and I think it's at home. I think that's one we can take care of.
For any viewers watching right now, for you to say that the Dolphins are starting 7-0 is a miracle. I don't think I've ever in my life would have have heard you say they're starting 7-0.
I don't feel good about it, to be honest with you, but it just, I can make an argument as each game goes on why, and they seem to make sense to me. Like losing to Buffalo right here seems to make sense to me. I do think, though, I have us beating the Rams on Monday Night Football, because I think we can. I think we can match them speed for speed, and I think we can do it. The next 2 home games, Raiders and Patriots, you got to win those games. I'm going to give us the wins there. There's always a slip up. There's always a game you should win that you lose. The Raiders could be that game, like the Colts. But we're not.
But when you think about when you think about the best teams, the slip up is very small, and it's against a team that's somewhat competitive. Like I don't see that slip up being against the Raiders or the Patriots. If anything, maybe like the Packers or the Texans.
The Raiders did give us a game last year. It was a very close game, and it came down to Jalen Ramsey interception at the end, if you remember.
Right.
So they're tough. I do have us losing to the Packers. The Packers are very good. They did just also give Jordan what's his name? Jordan Love.
Jordan Love.
A big contract extension, bigger than Tua's, of $220 million. They're very young. They're very fast. They have a lot of talent. It's at home. It could be freezing. That's a tough one to give Miami.
Yeah, I didn't even mention the weather. Yeah, 100% in Green Bay for sure.
Jets at home. You got to get that win. Hopefully the Jets, Aaron Rodgers stinks, and I hope they're not good. But yeah, you got to win that game. Tennessee on the road. That's a tough game. Houston, sorry. I think we lose that game. CJ Stroud is really good. They're going to be good. That's a really good team. They picked up even more talent. I think they may win their division and be a force to reckon with again.
They stole Stephon Diggs from Buffalo. They bring in Joe Mixon as well. I mean, that team is stacked on offense, not to mention the improvements on defense they made also. So that's definitely a solid team in the AFC as well.
Yep. 49ers at home. I'm going to give us that one. Because I think the talent there is going to be similar, and maybe Brock Purdy gets figured out a little bit, and San Francisco, after being really good the last couple of years, just takes a slight dip. I'm hoping. I don't think the Browns are going to be very good, but I think they will be pretty competitive. That is freezing cold in Cleveland on a Sunday night game. I think that's a loss for Miami based on weather. That worries me a lot. The Jets game on the road to end the season worries me a lot too. I mean, if there's a very strong chance it's the flex game to finish out the season. if both teams are vying. It could be for the last wild card spot. It could be for the win in the division. I do not want us to lose on the road the last game of the season, so I'm giving us that win. So amazingly enough, somehow we are 13-4
I mean,
as well. So
I thought people make fun of me as the homer. You make fun of me for
no,
being
I really don't.
too subjective. I mean, this is
Listen,
crazy.
the craziest thing is that I have a hard time believing us being 13-4. I think 11-6 is probably more realistic. There's 2 losses in there somewhere.
Right.
Colts, 49ers, Jets,
What
somewhere
you
in
don't
there.
what you don't want to see is 6 straight losses at the end, which from a lot of pundits out there think is very possible with the changes those other teams at the end of the
It
season
is.
have
Those
made.
last 6 games, I don't think you're going to lose to the Jets twice. So I think we're good enough to beat them at least one time. So there is that. But Tennessee, sorry, I keep saying Tennessee. Houston on the road is a tough one. The 49ers is a tough one. And then the Browns, they're going to be good, okay. And that's really tough to go to Cleveland in freezing at night and play. So it's just not favorable there. The schedule makers did not do us any favors with those last 4 games.
No,
They're rough.
they're definitely gonna put the Dolphins to the test, and hopefully they can conquer some of those challenges that they've dealt with since the arrival of Mike McDaniel, and hopefully get that first playoff victory. But that's a schedule that's going to be difficult. But now you have faith in this team. You have the new coaching staff or the revamped coaching staff. You have the players that you brought in this offseason who are supposed to be key pieces to the future of this Dolphins team for the next couple of seasons. And your star quarterback, who we were waiting to re-sign, finally got that contract extension. He's going to be a big part in Miami, and hopefully Tyreek Hill and him can work together for the next few years. Hopefully he gets that contract as well. But this is the first episode of the Suffering Sports Fan podcast. Yes, we're doing Dolphins talk, but for any other suffering sports fans out there, we'd love to have you on or hear your thoughts about your teams. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far and you love hearing us talk about the Dolphins.
We did originally plan to have this podcast be 15 minutes. I just it did not
that
work
is
out
correct.
well.
That is correct. We'll clip some things. We'll put some stuff out there, but either way, if you made it this far or if you skipped around, we appreciate it. Thanks for listening. First episode of the Suffering Sports Fan podcast. I'm Adam.
All right.
It's my dad.
I'm Roy.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.